Okay, so imagine this. Your entire nation has just collapsed. I mean, your city is in ruins, your leaders are gone, everything you've ever known is just gone. Where do you possibly find hope in that? Well, about 200 years after this exact thing happened, an ancient writer we call the Chronicler looked back at all that wreckage and found this radical, game-changing message about the future. It was a message that would completely redefine what it even meant to be God's people.
To really get the chronicler's message of hope, we have to understand the sheer scale of the disaster first. For the people of Judah, this wasn't just losing a war. No, this felt like the actual kingdom of God on earth had been completely wiped out. It was a total crisis of identity.
So, how did it happen? Well, the collapse was unbelievably fast, and it marked a total end to their political and spiritual identity as they knew it.
What's just wild is how quickly everything fell apart. It really all kicked off with the death of their last good king, Josiah. Almost immediately, bam, Egypt swoops in, puts its own puppet rulers on the throne, and starts demanding heavy taxes. But that doesn't last long, because the new superpower, Babylon, shows up and asserts its dominance, which leads to this horrific siege. And then, the unthinkable happens. Jerusalem falls, the temple is burned to the ground, and the nation, as a political state, is just over.
Now, from the chronicler's point of view, looking back on all this wasn't just bad luck or a military screw-up. He saw much deeper reason. The nation had been unfaithful. They had broken their sacred promise, their covenant with God. And this wasn't just about a few people messing up. This was a fundamental failure of faith and trust on a national level. It's a theme you see all over the writings of the prophet Jeremiah.
So is that it then? A sad story of failure and punishment, end of chapter? The chronicler, writing 2 centuries later from this small community gathered around a new, much humbler temple, says, no way, that is not the whole story. He sees something more going on here, a deeper purpose at play.
And his first clue comes from a prophecy. He takes another look at that 70-year exile and realizes it wasn't just a punishment. It was a period with a very specific divine purpose.
The key is this number, 70. You see, the prophet Jeremiah had said that after 70 years in exile, there would be a restoration. The chronicler grabs onto this number and uses it to unlock a really profound theological meaning behind all the suffering.
So here's what he does. The chronicler points back to the law in Leviticus, which said the land itself had to be given a Sabbath rest every 7th year. Well, for 490 years, that's 70 times 7, the people had totally ignored this. So the chronicler argues God himself stepped in to give the land its long overdue vacation. The 70-year exile becomes a forced Sabbath. It completely reframes the disaster. It's not just an ending, but a time of restoration for the land itself. Pretty cool, right?
But here's where the chronicler's big idea gets really radical. He redefines the very meaning of the word Israel, shifting it from a place on a map to a very specific kind of people.
You see, the meaning of Israel wasn't set in stone. At first, it was just a new name for one guy, Jacob. Then later, it became the name for the northern political kingdom, which was separate from Judah. But the chronicler makes this absolutely crucial shift. He redefines Israel, or as he calls it, all Israel, not as a country or a territory, but as a people defined by God's promise. And this is the exact same definition that the Apostle Paul would pick up and run with centuries later.
So you end up with these two competing visions of what Israel is. The old idea, Israel as a political entity defined by your family tree and ruled by a king on a throne. But the chronicler's vision, and later Paul's, is of all Israel as a community of faith. It's defined not by your bloodline, but by God's promise, and its main job isn't politics, it's worshiping God.
And this connection just becomes crystal clear when you get to the book of Romans. Paul is wrestling with the exact same question. Has God forgotten his people, all Israel? And his answer is this passionate, may it never be. He then argues, just like the chronicler did, that the true Israel is defined by faith. And this opens the door for non-Jewish believers, the Gentiles, to be grafted in, becoming full members of this people of promise.
Okay, so if Israel is no longer a political state with borders and an army, how does it even exist? Right? How does this kingdom of God actually become visible in the world? For the chronicler, the answer is both simple and incredibly profound. The kingdom is made real when the people of God gather together. It's in their collective praise, their shared worship, that their identity as God's kingdom is actually revealed.
You could even say their most important political act is the act of worship itself. So what does that worship look like? Well, as Dr. August Konkel puts it, the chronicler is all about the actions of faith. The real testimony of the kingdom isn't just in what you say or what you believe in your head. It's in the music, the rituals, the physical act of just showing up. It's in all the ways we actively show our faith together.
And this, of course, brings us to the ultimate fulfillment of the chronicler's whole idea. His little community rallied around a physical temple made of stone. But for Christians, the center of worship gets radically redefined. Jesus shows up and declares that he is the temple. The people of God no longer gather around a building, they gather around a person. He becomes the place where God dwells and the center of all praise.
So we're left with this powerful idea, a thread that stretches all the way from the ruins of Jerusalem right to us today. The chronicler found hope by redefining the kingdom of God as a community of worshipers. And that brings the question right to our doorstep. If our collective worship is how God's kingdom is made visible on earth, what story is our worship telling the world?